Tonight on Reporting Scotland, the First Minister tells the SNP conference she'll set up a publicly owned, not-for-profit energy company. Serious financial problems for NHS Tayside despite a £37 million bailout. Celebrations on the tiny Hebridean island of Ulva as the residents win permission for a community buyout. Athlete Jane Nisbet tells us how mental health issues nearly robbed her of her sporting dream.
Felt like I literally was useless. I had really bad bulimia, which was combined with a bit of depression, and I just suffered with anxiety for lots of years afterwards.
Also on the programme, go for a dance and buy a book. A new play tells the tale of the gay bookshop that started in the cloakroom of this Edinburgh club. Hello there, good evening. The First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, has promised to set up a publicly owned, not-for-profit energy company by the next Holyrood election. The new firm will seek to reduce bills by selling as close to cost price as possible. Ms Sturgeon made the announcement in her keynote address to the SNP conference in Glasgow. Well, now it's over to our political editor, Brian Taylor. Brian.
Katrina, thanks very much indeed. This was a policy-rich speech from the First Minister with a whole succession of commitments designed to appeal to Scottish voters. How to pay for them? Well, on funding, Nicola Sturgeon said it was right, it was entirely right to consider limited use of Scotland's devolved tax powers. We'll get more details on that later. There was something of a waiting game too on independence. Indeed, Nicola Sturgeon appeared to delegates to be patient. This from my colleague Gren Campbell.
At the risk of tempting fate, I've come prepared.
With cough sweets to avoid a Theresa May-style performance, Nicola Sturgeon gave a full-throated pledge to set up a new company over the next few years to compete with existing energy suppliers to provide low-cost power.
I'm delighted to announce today that by the end of this Parliament, we will set up a publicly owned, not-for-profit energy company.
The party leader said spending on nursery education and childcare would double by the next Holyrood election, that young people leaving care would be exempt from paying council tax, and she warned local authorities they must use housing money to deliver new affordable homes.
If you don't use all of your allocation to deliver new housing, we will take back the balance and give it to one that can.
She attacked the UK government's handling of Brexit and the EU's silence over Catalonia.
When the people of Catalonia, EU citizens, were violently attacked by police just for trying to vote, the EU should have spoken up loudly to condemn it.
Despite this criticism, Nicola Sturgeon said the SNP was determined to keep Scotland at the heart of Europe, and she renewed her commitment to revisit the question of independence when Brexit terms are clearer.
We may not yet know exactly when the choice will be made, but we can, we must, and we will make the case for independence always.
With no elections looming and a second independence referendum on hold, this conference hasn't had quite the same energy as those over the last couple of years. But standing in this room right now, you'd hardly know it. This is a party very much behind its leader. She'll appreciate their patience and that she got through her conference speech without a splutter. Glen Campbell, Reporting Scotland, Glasgow.
Now, in her speech to the conference, Nicola Sturgeon also confirmed that residents of the small Hebridean island of Ulva have been given permission to attempt a community buyout. The island, which sits off the west of Mull, has just a few permanent residents, and they'll now have to try and find more than £4 million. Craig Anderson has more.
It takes literally a minute on the tiny ferry to cross to Ulva. And today all eyes were focused on the speech that islanders and the wider community of North West Mull hoped would give them the right to mount a buyout of the island estate.
We have today granted permission to the people of Ulva to bring their island into community ownership.
The announcement won an emotional response.
I think it offers great opportunity to bring people back to the island, to strengthen the numbers in the school, to kind of offer a future for young people to stay in the area. And I think if you give people a stake in where they live, they're more likely to stay here.
The aim of the community group bidding for ownership is repopulation and stemming what they see as the terminal decline of the island and the wider area.
The economy and the social fabric of Ulva has been in decline for some years. 20 or 30 years ago there were 20 or 30 people living here and working here. There are now just 6 people living here. So it's been in serious decline.
The fish farm boys, sort of tended to come and go, and there's quite a few elderly ones died and moved off the island. So, so we've not really been replaced with younger ones, which we really need some young blood back on the island.
But with an asking price of around £4 million for just a handful of residents, the government insists it's not simply handing the community the keys or a blank cheque.
They've got to get the money together. I mean, there are no easy hits here, so they still have to make sure they can fund the purchase. They've still got to do all the work to actually make sure that they can grow the island both economically and in population terms.
The community here now has several months in which to formulate a plan and raise enough money to buy the island, and it could be one of the most expensive community buyouts in Scottish history. But with the experience of islands like Egg and Gia behind them, the community here is confident they will make a go of it. Craig Anderson reporting Scotland on the island of Ulva.
Now, Brian, this was a different conference speech, perhaps reflective of a different political era.
Yeah, it is a different era, isn't it? There isn't a referendum on the horizon. There isn't an election around the corner, at least as far as we know. And so Nicola Sturgeon was urging a waiting game on each of these topics, a waiting game on Brexit, a waiting game on the subsequent and possibly concomitant referendum on independence. There was an amusing moment, Katrina, during the speech when she said, philosophically, what sort of country do we want to be? And one wag in the audience shouted out, an independent one. Now, Nicola Sturgeon definitely does not dissent from that perspective. She just added one rider to her friendly heckler, saying, as well as independence, one required fairness in the future Scotland. And so this was about a policy-rich speech, trying to set out the details of how she is governing now, perhaps in line with the public mood that wants to focus on more mundane matters. On independence, she was saying she hold off. She was saying car canny. Why? Because she believes it would not be right tactically or strategically to be putting forward another constitutional change while the people of Scotland and the UK are still digesting the huge constitutional change that is Brexit.
Brian, thanks for that. Well, the number of homicides in Scotland has risen for the first time in 7 years. Figures just published show the number of victims rose by 6 in the year to the end of last March. But the total of 64 is still the second lowest in the past 40 years. 3 of the killings were unsolved. As in previous years, the most common method of killing was by stabbing. NHS Tayside has pledged to safeguard jobs despite the serious financial problems, which has seen a government bailout of £37 million over the last 5 years. In a report today to the Scottish Parliament, the Auditor-General says the board's position is extremely challenging. Our Health and Social Care correspondent Shelley Joffrey reports.
NHS Tayside has been on life support for the last 5 years. Overspending on staff, prescribing and clinical supplies have left the board having to be continually bailed out. In spite of savings last year of more than £45 million, in the coming year a funding gap of nearly £50 million is forecast.
I think there has been a focus on short-term financial planning, and you can see that in the extent to which they've needed loan funding from the government to balance the books at the end of each financial year. I think that the transformation plan they're working with now really gets under the skin of what the challenges are, but there's no doubt that implementing it will be a real challenge for them for the longer term.
With so many savings still to make, the impact on patient care is a concern. Already 1 in 5 patients here have to wait more than 12 weeks for hospital treatment.
It's my husband that's in. He's having a hip operation. He had to wait so long to get in to get his operation, but he's in now and it's fine.
There is sometimes about 2 to 3 month wait, but I guess there's not much you can do about that. The amount of patients that are being seen.
We had some problems when he was born and couldn't thank the neonatal department here and the staff at Nine Wells for everything they did, so yeah, brilliant.
You haven't noticed anything
None
in
at all.
terms of staffing pressures and anything like that?
None at all. None at all.
The Health Board says patient care hasn't and won't be compromised. Neither will staffing levels.
There is no planned job cut, so I'll say that. That is not part of our plan whatsoever. And as you know, there is a no redundancy policy in NHS Scotland. But just through natural attrition in terms of people retiring, there are opportunities where we will work with our staff and build services that are commensurate with the staff that we have.
The Royal College of Nursing warns the right mix of staff with the right skills must be maintained to keep the focus on high-quality patient care.
Well, Shelley's outside Ninewells Hospital in Dundee for us this evening. So, Shelley, how embarrassing is this for the Health Secretary, Shona Robertson?
Well, obviously, this is her home turf, and Tayside's continued failure to break even doesn't look good. Other health boards have financial pressures, but the problems here are really in a different league. The health board say they date back to decisions made years ago, and there's no quick fix, but they say they're making the changes and the savings that are required without compromising patient care. The Scottish Government has actually suspended the repayments of the loans it's made to NHS Tayside. There's £33 million outstanding still, and that's really to give the Health Board a fighting chance of getting back on a firm financial footing. But it's not going to be easy. The Auditor General says there's a high risk that Tayside won't balance the books again next year, and they'll need yet another sub from the Scottish Government.
Thanks, Shelley. A man seriously injured in an explosion at a commercial premises in North Lanarkshire last week has died. The lawyer who drafted Edinburgh's tram contract has admitted he didn't tell the council they were being misled about changes which cost the taxpayer more. And a former record-breaking athlete has told BBC Scotland her best achievement was beating bulimia. This week we're investigating what an electric highway might mean for Scotland. Gordon Strachan's future as Scotland manager will be discussed at a Scottish FA board meeting on Thursday. It's a little-known chapter in Scottish social history. The first gay bookshop, which began life in the cloakroom of an Edinburgh nightclub, is now being celebrated in a new play. Birdwatchers have been left in a bit of a flap after the rare arrival of an off-track adult Siberian blue robin in North Ronaldsay. And now a reminder of tonight's main news. The First Minister's announced the Scottish Government will set up a publicly owned not-for-profit energy company to secure low prices for customers. Britain's biggest defence contractor BAE Systems is cutting almost 2,000 jobs. The firm, which makes the Eurofighter Typhoons, facing a drop in demand. The majority of proposed redundancies are at the company's 2 sites in Lancashire. And in the last half hour, the President of Catalonia has asked the region's parliament to suspend the declaration of independence, saying he wants time for a reasonable dialogue with the Spanish state. Mr Puigdemont condemned the actions of the Spanish government during the disputed independence vote, but he acknowledged that people on all sides were worried about what would happen next. And now to Reporting Scotland. I'll be back with the headlines at 8 and again with the late bulletin just after the 10 o'clock news.